you can drop measured plastic chemicals in your urine by 60% in a week. Not a year, a week.
2.4 million plastic particles per liter.
Per liter, Chuck.
I mean, that's just the count from one bottle of water. 11.6 billion plastic particles from a single tea bag. I mean, a friggin' tea bag. These aren't predictions, Dr. B. These are particles that were measured. We're talking about plastic that's already inside of you.
Yes, but here's the good news, Chuck. There's a brand new study that just came out, published in Nature Medicine. That is the reason that I called you up. And I was like, Chuck, hit the record button. We need to get out there and talk about this, because basically what they showed is that you can drop measured plastic chemicals in your urine by 60% in a week, not a year, a week.
That's a quick drop. And I know that this is a super hot topic right now. So today's episode is the most up-to-date version of microplastics data that you can find anywhere online today. We are going to be going through what's in your body, why it might be making you sick, and the 7-day Australian Playbook for what to do about it. You just mentioned that 60% drop in a week. We're going to be telling you how to get a lot of that plastic out of your system. So you ready, Dr. B?
Let's go.
All right, man, let's go. So before we go deep, I want to actually set the table with a gut check, so to speak. 5 questions. You just give me the quick answers. Sound good?
Sounds good. I'll do my best.
All right. As we already alluded to, I think that we know this answer, but microplastics, are they or are they not already in our system?
Yes, they're already there.
And are they hurting us, Dr. B?
I mean, I don't think they're helping you, but we'll talk about it.
Bottled water versus tap water. What's the bigger offender here?
Give me the tap over the bottled water, please.
Tap over bottled. And can you actually clean these microplastics out of your system?
Tricky one, Chuck. I don't like the word clean them out.
Ooh.
But we're going to talk about how you reduce them.
Okay. I feel like we're splitting hairs. I'm looking forward to diving into that. Final question before we get going. You're a lever guy. What is the single biggest lever you can pull here to help clean them out of your system?
Food.
Food?
One word. Food.
Really?
Yes.
All right then, man. Let's start where you do most of your work, you GI guy. Let's start with the gut here. Microplastics in the gut. Connect the dots for us, my man.
All right, cool, Chuck. So there have been some interesting studies that have come out in recent years. And let me start by saying this, that everything that we're going to discuss today, unless I make it totally clear, everything that we're going to discuss is cross-sectional research. And it's really important, because cross-sectional allows you to make associations. It means that they are present at the same time in the same place together. But it doesn't allow you to say that there's causation. So I just want to give that caveat before we dive in and go deeper, Chuck, because what I'm about to get into, I can't say that it's actually causing, but these things are there together, and we can unpack that further. You please feel free to ask me questions as we go.
Yeah, as we set this up, when you say like it's hard to prove that it's actually causing it, like if this were a legal case, would you say that the evidence right now is just circumstantial and there's not necessarily that smoking gun?
Ooh, that was good, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
I do. I think that there's circumstantial evidence, and I think that what the listeners at home need to understand is that we're building the case.
Right on.
We're building the case. And so sometimes as a detective, you have to go deeper. You have to continue to learn. You have to continue to question. And so you get that initial influx of evidence and you go, there's something here. I can smell it. But until you get to the point that you can actually say with total clarity, yes, this is the actual culprit. This is the total cause. We're not quite there yet, but I think like the bottom line is there's enough there that, look, these microplastics, they're not making you healthier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we find them present in the body in these locations that we're about to discuss, I just want people to understand. I don't want you to panic. I'm going to walk you through, by the way, Chuck, the exact strategies that I use myself on a daily basis in this episode.
All right,
All right.
GIPI. Like, let's start building that case here.
Well, so part of the concern is that these plastics are coming into our body through our mouth, right? That our food supply is actually the source of the issue on a very broad level. And so they've studied this in patients who have inflammatory bowel disease. Now, these people with inflammatory bowel disease, their immune system is out of control. It is attacking their microbiome. They end up with inflammation inside of their intestines, which can be either ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, and that will manifest with symptoms. Could be diarrhea, abdominal discomfort, urgency, right? So that's inflammatory bowel disease. All right, but the key here, the plastic going in through the mouth. When they studied a group of patients who have inflammatory bowel disease and they compared them to healthy controls, what they found is that the patients with inflammatory bowel disease had 50% higher microplastics in their poop than the healthy people.
I guess when they're looking at IBD, I would want to know specifically what also their diet would be entailing. Because if we're talking about microplastics, then I'm going to jump to like prepackaged, ultra processed foods that, literally the food from the time that it's packaged. I mean, it's literally living in package. And a lot of times now you even have, heat and eat. You don't even have to take it out of the plastic package. You just put it in the microwave and heat it up that way. I would imagine a lot of plastic might be seeping in that way. Did they take it a step further and look at the diets as well? Like the food sources, are their foods generally wrapped in more plastic? Did they dig that deep, Dr. B?
Well, so what they found in this particular study is that these patients were disproportionately consuming takeout.
Aha.
So they were going out to restaurants, getting food that was cooked, added to a plastic take home, right? Because they're not going to give you your take home meal on a plate or with glass. So you take it home with plastic, and this was one of the major concerns that exists is could that be the source of a higher concentration, 50% higher concentration of microplastics in the stool?
Fair game, right. The hot food gets in the plastic then leaches into the hot food. But what if somebody just orders like a sandwich or something that's cold? Is the risk the same, do you think?
No, I don't think the risk is the same if it's cold. I think one of the key takeaways that I want for the listeners is if you only remember one thing, I want you to remember that heat and acid are not good when they come into contact with plastic. Heat and acid are the things that you want to stay away from when it comes to plastic.
Are we talking about all kinds of acid, like citric acid, like from vitamin C, right? You put a little bit of lemon on top of your salad, even though that's cold. Is that still a no-no?
I mean, if you have your salad and it's inside of a nice glass bowl, you have zero concerns because there's no plastic as a part of that system in the first place. But yes, if we talk about, for example, vinegar in a plastic bottle, I have concerns about that.
Right.
So, all right. Now, inflammatory bowel disease is not the only gut example where this is the case. There's a really interesting study where basically they compiled results from 13 studies together. And here's what they found, Chuck. They found 3 different health conditions. And interestingly, 3 different types of tissue, all of which involving microplastics. So let me break this down. They looked at inflammatory bowel disease, colorectal cancer, and cirrhosis, which is in the liver. And in each of these cases, they found within the context of the disease itself, inflammatory bowel disease, colorectal cancer, and cirrhosis, they found a disproportionate concentration of these microplastics. But the other part that's interesting is for inflammatory bowel disease, they're taking stool specimens. For colorectal cancer, they're taking a piece of the tumor. And for the cirrhosis, they're taking a liver biopsy. Totally different types of tissue. And in all cases, disproportionate concentration of the microplastics are present within those tissues.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. You're saying that they actually found evidence of microplastics within a tumor itself?
Yes. So within the context of a colorectal cancer, they're finding a disproportionate concentration of the microplastics there within the cancer. They're finding it again inside the liver. Um, and, there's a way in which you can sort of tie this all together through the gut, Chuck.
Mm.
Because now, again, to be clear, these studies are cross-sectional, so by themselves do not prove causation. But when you take these studies and then you add in the things that we've learned about the impact that microplastics have on our gut, you start to create an interesting story. Because what we've found is that microplastics, they disrupt the gut microbiome. You get less of the short chain fatty acid producing microbes. You get more of the inflammatory microbes. At the same time, they thin out the mucus layer, which is a protective layer that lines the cells throughout your intestines. And then they've actually found that there's disruption of the gut barrier. So in essence, what we're doing is we're breaking down the microbiome, breaking down the mucus layer, breaking down the gut barrier. And anyone who's read my most recent book, Plant Powered Plus, you know that this is actually the mechanistic basis for creating chronic low-grade inflammation. But the other element, Chuck, is that now these microplastics, which started in your mouth, started as a part of your food, if you could have an intact gut barrier, in most cases, those microplastics would actually just come out in your poop. But if the gut barrier breaks down, you are creating a pathway for absorption. So then next thing you know, here they are, they're showing up in the liver because the blood that leaves your gut travels first to the liver, and then we see them concentrating there.
All right, so let's branch out, right? So the gut, as we're talking about, that's one piece of this puzzle, but as you're just mentioning here, the microplastics, they get into your blood, right? So let's explore that, because they get into the blood, they can kind of go wherever. I mean, you mentioned the liver, you mentioned other places. Like, let's explore that a little bit further.
Okay, so it really started with a 2022 study. I have to be clear though, this was not a massive study. It was only 22 people, but they were healthy people. These are not people with disease. And they did a very simple thing. They drew a blood specimen, and then they basically said, is there detectable plastic in this blood specimen? And the answer was yes. And since that time, we have been branching out to explore different tissues and different parts of the body. We have found, and this, I mean, I hate this, it makes me sad. We have found microplastics in the placenta.
Really?
Yeah. So they're now calling it the plasticenta.
Wow.
Because they have detected that it actually can accumulate in the placenta. Now the hope is that the placenta is on a level protecting the baby, and so like forming a shield in a way, but we don't know.
Yeah.
They have detected microplastics in human breast milk. Now, to be clear, this does not change the position of human breast milk being the optimal way to feed an infant. But that being said, like, they are being detected in this place. In men, they have detected microplastics in the testicles.
What else you got?
The brain.
Ooh.
Which is a scary thing, because you think about neurocognitive disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. They actually have found that not only is it getting to the brain, it's actually concentrating in the brain, that they've found higher levels of microplastics in the brain than they did in the liver or the kidney.
Mm. Mm.
And they actually tracked the people who they were studying with this, and they actually found that there was an increase that was occurring over time with this.
Yeah.
So, which is not surprising. It seems that our exposure is increasing over time.
I would think so. And that reminds me of a conversation that I once had with a researcher specifically about microplastics. And she was explaining in one study, this may be the same study because it also referenced liver and kidneys in addition to the brain. But she said essentially, human beings, what they've discovered, we die with about, you ever gone to a picnic and use like a disposable plastic spoon? So about that much plastic in our brain that's accumulated over the years. That's a lot of plastic. Like you think about holding up a spoon next to a brain, like that's a significant amount of real estate, bro.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit terrifying. And like imagine, you get an X-ray and there's a plastic fork in your brain,
Right?
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 Like you would freak out.
Big time.
So, yeah. No,
Eh,
I
Yeah,
hate that. But I think that's look, that's all quite scary, and that's the reason why we have this episode today, so that we can talk about the strategies that are good.
absolutely. So look, I mean, when we started here today, you said there was one moment when this stopped feeling like an environmental story to you. What
Yeah.
was that big moment?
I mean, let me be honest here, Chuck, that through the years, plastic's a problem. It's everywhere in our life. And we all know that it's not really that biodegradable. So, you use your plastic, you throw it in your trash can, you know that it's accumulating somewhere and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And then you hear these stories about the ocean and the six-pack rings and the turtles, and it's all quite disturbing. But there was a moment when I realized it was boomeranging back to us as humans.
Mm, mm.
And that was this 2024 study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, this was actually a study out of Italy, but it was quite well done, because basically what they did, Chuck, is they took a group of people that were undergoing a surgery called a carotid end arterectomy. Now, in essence, what's happening here? Your carotid artery is in your neck. There's two of them, one on each side, and it feeds the blood to your brain, and it's critical for that. And for people who have atherosclerosis, where like the same issue that causes heart disease, you can accumulate plaque in the carotid artery. And it's sort of a brutal thing that we have to do this, but a surgeon will go in, slice open the artery, and basically strip out that plaque.
Mm.
And the intent is to basically like not only restore blood flow to the brain, but reduce the risk of having a stroke for that person. So anyway, when they did this, they stripped out that plaque. They looked at the plaque, because you kind of have that like almost like a souvenir after surgery. And they looked under a microscope at it and they found plastic particles.
Whoa.
And they separated the group into two main groups: those that had a high concentration of plastic particles and those that had a low concentration of plastic particles. And then they tracked them for the next basically 3 years. And what they found is that those who had a higher concentration of the plastic particles within this carotid plaque, they were more likely to have a heart attack, have a stroke, or to die from any cause during those next roughly 3 years.
Wow.
And so now the likelihood is not, by the way, a trivial small number. The likelihood was big.
Yeah.
So they were 4.5 times more likely, right? These are people who started, in theory, from the same position. They all have plaque in their carotid artery, right? So you already know at baseline, they all have atherosclerosis. They all have, I'm sure they have it in their heart too. But you remove that plaque and then you track them, and the ones who had more microplastics, 4.5 times more likely to have a heart attack, a stroke, or to die in the next 3 years. That's a dramatic difference.
Huge. I mean, like, and who would have thought? And as you were describing how they do this procedure, like my mind, for whatever reason, jumped to going into the kitchen and like slicing a cucumber open, just lengthwise, and then scooping out the seeds in the middle. It sounds to me like that's essentially what the surgeons are doing when they go into the artery and kind of clear out that plaque. And then I assume they took the plaque and shipped it off to be analyzed. Is there any particular form of plastic that they found in these studies that was, I don't know, more present than other forms?
Well, they did find, interesting enough, they did find polyethylene to be disproportionately present.
Okay.
So almost 60% of the plaques had polyethylene. What is polyethylene? That's the plastic that you find in a plastic bag. So, take that for what it's worth. I mean, they did find 12% of them had PVC. Think about that, PVC pipes.
Like piping?
Yeah.
Like what your water's delivered in,
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly. But in this case, it's in your arteries sitting just inches away from your brain.
Oh, that's not good. And that kind of makes me worry, like, even for the healthy individuals among us that, don't eat a lot of cholesterol in their diet, their arteries would otherwise be clean. The microplastics, again, anecdote, well, just making an assumption based off of the case that we're building here today, their arteries can still be clogged with other things other than cholesterol deposits. These microplastics they can make themselves at home whether or not there's a cholesterol deposit. Do we know that?
Can we talk about that?
Let's.
Okay, please. Because basically that allows us to explore how what is happening inside the body when there's exposure to microplastics. So, I said like these studies, so like these are human studies and they're cross-sectional. But what we also have is we have an entire body of preclinical research, laboratory-based research, including animal models and things like this, that allow us to see like what's happening with microplastics. And here's what we're discovering, and I'm going to tie it back to what you just brought up, Chuck. So it seems that there's actually 4 ways in which microplastics are potentially causing injury within the body. So first of all, there's just the physical injury, that the presence of these microplastics could cause harm to cells directly, just like on a physical basis.
Yeah.
All right. The second thing is that microplastics basically create what's called oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is something that like it's associated with aging, it's associated with cellular injury. It's the reason that we focus on polyphenols, because polyphenols are what we call antioxidant. So here we have the sort of counterpoint to that the microplastics appear to be increasing oxidative stress, which causes injury to the cells in an indirect way. Number 3, they activate the immune system. That's inflammation. So you set off all of these inflammatory cytokines. These cytokines, if you've read Plant Powered Plus, they're like the walkie-talkies where the immune cells are talking to each other like, yo, I need reinforcements over here. We got a problem. All right. And when you set off these inflammatory cytokines, basically reinforcements start showing up to these locations where the microplastics are, and they create inflammation. IL-1, IL-6, TNF alpha, they're all showing up in these locations. All right. And then number 4, these microplastics don't just show up by themselves. They're like travelers carrying a backpack. But what's in the backpack is not something that you particularly want in some cases, because the microplastics could be absorbing pollutants, could be absorbing pesticides, or the forever chemicals, PFAs, or these things called PCBs. Many of the listeners have probably heard about these things. And like, do they exist within our diet? Yes. Can they be excreted in your poop? Yes. But if you create a vehicle to basically get them into the body, well, we don't particularly want that. And that's one of the concerns that has shown up with the microplastics, is that they can actually be carriers.
Well, I mean, daggone it, that doesn't seem very fair. Why is their backpack stuffed with all of this toxic stuff? Why can't it be like filled with, become a carrier for vitamin C or B12 or D or calcium or something friggin' healthy as opposed to all of this nefarious stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the counterpoint is that you could be eating, delicious plant-based food that's a carrier for fiber and polyphenols and healthy fats, and right. So not everything in the environment is playing to our benefit. That's what's totally clear,
Mm,
right? And that's the problem that we have here. And so this is all converging, Chuck, on inflammation,
yeah.
right? That there's an entire story of cellular breakdown, gut microbiome breakdown, activation of the immune system, exposure to these chemicals. It creates inflammation, and inflammation has been tied to cirrhosis, has been tied to inflammatory bowel disease, has been tied to colorectal cancer, has been tied to atherosclerosis, including stroke, including coronary artery disease, including Alzheimer's disease. So I think that what we're seeing is that there's this strong emerging story that microplastics are actually inflammatory.
Emerging story, but again, I mean, we're still building the case. It's still circumstantial, and the authors of the study you were talking about even said as much, paraphrasing, obviously. So we can't say like, bottom line, this is why the person had the heart attack was microplastics. Can't say that yet, but the case is building. But I'll tell you what else is building, Dr. B, my level of nervous energy hearing about this, because at this point, like, I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed. You've given us little glimmers of light here, but I want to focus now on the solution a little bit more if we can. So, like, what are we supposed to do here? I mean, well, how in the world do we begin to treat this problem and get the same kind of results as the study you were talking about at the top of the show, where you mentioned a 60% reduction within a week? Start building them, the solutions for us, my man.
This study to me is a game changer,
Yeah,
and it's the reason that we're here today.
yeah.
So it gives us a 7-day playbook that allows us to, in just 7 days, drop our BPA levels, which is one of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, by 60%. Basically, what they did is they started with an association study of over 200 people. This is, by the way, all in Australia. That's why we're talking about the Australian Playbook. And then they took a subset of 60 and they randomized them to one of 5 interventions. Now, I'm not going to walk you through all 5. It gets complicated. Here's what you need to understand, because this is the basic thesis that they were testing. One approach was to reduce plastics in the food system. So they attempted to minimize how much plastic comes into contact with your food from, like, basically from soil to mouth.
Mm.
So to the best of their ability, they minimized plastic exposure. Now, that's not just like plastic packaging, by the way, in the supermarket.
Yeah.
That's more so like, does it come in a bottle that's plastic? Does it come in a can that's lined with plastic? Right? We'll talk more about that. But basically, minimizing food-based plastic, number one. Number two was avoiding plastic in the kitchen. So they basically like minimized plastic utensils, minimized the use of plastic bowls or vessels that you might put into a microwave.
What about even the paper plate that has a plastic coating on it, or a paper bowl? I would imagine that you can run into trouble there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So, and then the third thing that they did as an intervention was to minimize plastic exposure in like your daily goods. So like your deodorant, your toothpaste, things like this. Okay. So those are the 3 interventions: food, kitchen exposure, and like daily goods. And
Well, hold on. Let me jump in. How in the world does one reduce their exposure to plastic for daily goods like toothpaste, which comes in, I believe, a plastic tube, or deodorant, which always comes in again like another kind of plastic tube? Like how? I don't even know where to begin to not introduce plastic to the body using those products?
Yeah, I think that the idea is great. The execution is very hard in the modern world
Yeah.
without total clarity on what direction to go with that. And I have to even be honest, they didn't make, because I think you have to almost go brand by brand.
Right. Right.
So what this is raising for me, Chuck, is the need for um, a legitimate certification process for products to make clear that they have like applied certain rules to minimize plastic exposure.
Well, let me ask you this too, before we move on. I know both you and I are huge coffee guys. One of the highlights of my day is going to Starbucks and just getting my Americano. I've heard the cups that hot coffee comes served in are like toxic dumps because they're lined with plastic and chemicals and things like that. Do you have a lot of concern using the coffee cups that are served at a Starbucks or any other coffee shop in America?
Yes, our key takeaway for today is to avoid heat and acid when it comes to plastic. And coffee is both hot and acidic. And you are putting it into a plastic lined cup, and you know that it's a plastic lined cup because if you leave it on your kitchen counter for a week, it hasn't like totally turned into mush.
Mm,
And so, what I do, Chuck, when I go to Starbucks is I ask for a mug.
nice. Oh, that's right.
Any
Because
coffee shop.
you sit there, right? You sit there at the actual shop. You don't like take the mug and run out the door.
No, but if you're going to take the mug and run, what you do is you walk in the door with your stainless steel, which is, by the way, going to retain heat far better,
Oh yeah.
right? And also, you're actually reducing this environmental concern that we have around the plastic as well, because, like, basically, forget recycling. You're just opting out from plastic,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and in some cases, coffee shops will give you a discount if you do that.
They do. I
Yeah.
know Starbucks likes that a lot. But yeah, I'll tell you the other thing with those stainless steel cups. I love it. It's like back in the day when I just had that old school, drip coffee maker and you leave it on the burner for hours and like, it stayed warm, but the coffee would become bitter. That's where you get the term burnt coffee. But you go to Starbucks or any coffee shop, you use the stainless steel mug there. That coffee is going to stay warm also for hours and hours and hours, but it's not going to get that burnt taste. It's a beautiful thing, my friends. If you've
Oh,
not
totally.
done this, do it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, anyway, with this Australian study, Chuck,
Yeah.
when they applied all of these three interventions at the same time in 7 days, they had a 60% drop in urinary BPA,
Huge.
a 53% drop in monobenzyl phthalate, and a 38% drop in monobutyl phthalate as well.
Nice. Nice.
So, and of the three interventions, because the reason why there was five, one of them was just a total control, but they were basically like trying different combinations. And among the different interventions that you could do, the food one proved to actually have the most powerful effect.
Which makes sense. I mean, despite the fact that you're talking about having to make changes in your kitchen and bringing your own mug or asking for a mug at your coffee shop, it's not as big of an ask as you might think. And in terms of the upside and the benefit for reducing inflammation, reducing the microplastic exposure, man, like that's a pretty good trade-off in my estimation.
There are three basic approaches to this problem.
Yeah.
Number one would be to reduce your exposure in the first place.
Yeah.
All right. Number two would be to mitigate the harmful effects, right? So we talked about causing cellular injury, increasing inflammation, disrupting the gut microbiome. Okay. So like above all else, we want to avoid that from happening in the first place, but we also want to like have a strategy to reinforce those processes and address them.
Right on.
And then number three is an idea of like trying to reduce plastic within your body by like enhancing excretion, cleaning the way that you described it in the beginning. Okay. So Those are the three main strategies. You tell me, where do you want to go?
Well, I like the idea of, let's start with the cleaning out, man. Let's start with the cleaning out, because I think that really, if somebody's been watching us for the past 38 minutes, like, let's go. I mean, they're ready to do some spring cleaning as we record this in May. So let's clean.
Okay. Well, so I don't want to disappoint you, Chuck.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, I'm going to, because the problem is that there is no evidence that you can actually enhance the purification or the cleaning of the body from microplastics. So here's what I mean by that. Can you drop microplastic levels in the body? Yes, the Australian study showed us by 60% in 7 days. You can drop it. But that's different than saying cleaning, in the sense that you're increasing the excretion in your poop, you're increasing the excretion in your urine, you're removing it from the bloodstream, you're removing it from the cells. We don't have any evidence that you can do that. Okay, so any supplement that's claiming that by taking this supplement, you will remove microplastics from your body, ask them, what is your evidence to support that? It does not exist. It might be a theory, but there is no human research that shows that by taking a supplement, you can actually enhance the purification of your body from microplastics. Does that make sense?
It does. So again, no magic pill. It sounds like just limiting exposure is going to be the key here for now, until science advances. I'm optimistic at some point we're going to figure out how to take care of the rest.
Yeah, so let's dive into that.
Yeah.
So limiting exposure is the lever.
Yeah.
That is the most powerful tool.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to clean it out if it never comes into the body in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? So we have the playbook that was started with the Perth study, and I want to continue to extend this.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so food and trying to minimize plastic exposure through our food was really important. By the way, in the Perth study, one of the things they specifically cited that can be quite powerful is avoiding canned food.
Canned food?
Yeah. It sucks. I hate it that I have to say this.
Oh, no.
But the can is lined with plastic. Right.
What if the can is labeled like BPA free or whatever?
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit of a trap.
Huh.
So, because what you can do is you can say, okay, well, we're not going to line our can with BPA, so we're going to use BPS instead. Right. And now technically you can wear that label. It makes it sound like you're so health conscious. It's BPA free, but guess what? That can is also lined with plastic. And here's the thing that I want people to know, Chuck. So I said, be wary when heat or acid comes into contact with plastic. So of course, anything that's acidic, tomatoes, tomato sauce, pineapples, right? You put that into a can, it's going to leach the plastic liner because it's sitting there on the shelf with time to do that. But the surprising part is the stuff that you wouldn't actually think of, like beans, green beans. Because
how would that work?
Yeah, so they're not inherently acidic. And when you buy them, they're room temperature. But that's not the way they were prepared. So the preparation process involves taking those, whatever they might be, vegetables, fruits, whatever they may, legumes, taking them and heating them up to extreme temperatures, right? Because that's what pasteurization is. And they also apply pressure, and this is after it's already inside the can.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, the result of that is that you basically have created an environment where you have allowed the plastic to shed into the food, and then it sits there on the shelf for months on end. And that process that you started, the plastic's already broken down. You see what I'm saying?
I do. But I want to go back to BPA versus BPS. Have there been any studies that you're aware of and this is putting you on the spot, so I apologize, that would say that BPS is as toxic to a human as BPA. Do we have those studies?
I mean, I think that these microplastics, BPA, BPS, you don't. I don't think that we should accept one as being better. I think we should be trying to avoid both.
Well, then BPS,
Right.
that's just BS if they're saying that that's a better option, you know?
Yeah, well, because does BPS need to be equally harmful in order for us to say that we should be trying to avoid both? No,
Right.
it doesn't.
Right.
Right. So that's the issue. Now, canned foods are a surprising source of microplastics. Right. I actually want to run through some other surprising sources
For sure.
because as I was researching this, some of these I knew and some of these I did not. So let me throw them out, Chuck.
Yeah.
All right. So you said paper cups.
Yep.
All right. I just said aluminum cans, coffee pods.
Like the little K cups?
All right. So like K cups, total clarity, hot, under pressure, right? That ain't good. But even Nespresso, aluminum, you don't think the aluminum has a plastic liner?
Ooh.
Hot, under pressure. All right. Of course, like frozen dinners. Okay. But here was a huge surprise for me, Chuck. Chewing gum.
Bubble gum? Really?
Chewing gum. Yes. So it turns out that there was this original source of gum prior to World War II, which there's different names for it, but like one of them is chicle. So you ever hear the word chick when it comes to bubble gum?
Chiclets.
That's what
back in the day, man. Chiclets.
There we go,
Yeah.
chiclets. So chicle is a form of natural rubber. But what they've done is they've replaced this with a synthetic plastic.
Oh.
And the idea was, oh, well, we can give the same texture, chewing experience. But now here what we're discovering is that you're like chewing this gum and you're basically creating microplastics in your mouth.
Ew.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then I guess like two other things that I want to touch on real quick, Chuck. One is ultra processed foods disproportionately increase microplastic exposure.
Yeah.
So every 10% of your diet that's ultra processed, they've discovered translates into about an 8% increase in microplastics. Okay. And then last thing is water. So water, you asked me bottle versus tap. And I said tap. Because the actual plastic bottle is shedding microplastic. Now, I have been of the belief through the years, oh, well, then get a glass bottle. But the problem is the cap is plastic lined too. So even glass bottle water is problematic.
Daggone.
Yeah. So what is the ideal? I can tell you with total clarity, what is the ideal?
What is the ideal, sir?
Reverse osmosis water.
Ah. Your famous filter.
Yeah. So if you have the famous filter, the particle size is so small that even the smallest plastic particle can't get through. So that to me is like, as soon as we're done, I'm going to go pound a big old glass of RO water in honor of this episode, Chuck.
There you go. Cheers, my man. Honorable mentions here. I know these were on our show prep sheet to peel back the curtain for everybody. Tea. Like tea bags, these can get people in trouble. I never thought of this because I never really thought that there would be plastic on a tea bag, but nonetheless, this can be a big concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, you want to do either loose leaf, which you can do with a stainless steel, I forgot what the proper term is, tea holster or whatever, and or you want a paper tea bag.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. A couple of remedies that I've heard that a lot of people, like maybe I've seen this on Instagram or TikTok, whatever the case may be, They say, well, look, activated charcoal, that can help strip this out of your body as well, these microplastics. Is there evidence to back up that claim?
No, there's no human evidence. I mean, at best, you can try to create theories, but there's no human evidence that you can increase the excretion in stool, increase the excretion in your urine, increase the elimination through your liver. There's no evidence that you can do that.
What about sweating it out in a sauna?
There was research many years ago that actually has been called into question. And even if you accept it for what it is, which is that basically what they showed is that there was a small amount of microplastic material in the actual sweat. So the idea was you're sweating it out. Even if you accept that to be true, the amount that exists when your sweat is so minuscule in comparison to the amount that comes into your body that would be like your drain, your sink is totally overflowing. And instead of turning off the sink, you're going to open up the drain ever so slightly, like the smallest amount.
Right.
And you're still overflowing like crazy.
Yeah. I say every little bit helps, but it's not going to be the magical cure. So let's kind of wind down here. Let's wrap up a little bit. If I were to say to you, true or false, microplastics are big time drivers of inflammation in the body, what would your response be?
I would say with total clarity, true. Okay. Disrupting the gut microbiome, disrupting the mucus layer, disrupting the gut barrier. This is what was discussed in Plant Powered Plus. And by the way, this individual evidence that when it gets into these tissues, it triggers the release of these inflammatory cytokines, which basically recruits these inflammatory cells, and then you create inflammation within the tissue.
All right. And I know that you've got a big announcement, honestly, about anti-inflammatory stuff that you wanted to make here on the show today. I'm super pumped for you. What is that announcement?
Well, I've been working on this idea of fighting inflammation for years.
Yeah.
And Plant Powered Plus came out in January, but there's so much more that we can get into to go beyond what was in the book.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting that process now with a completely free workshop that's going to be coming up, and you'll find the link down in the show notes. So, and even if it's after the date of the workshop, I'll share the video with you so that you can learn from it. That's really what this is about. So this is a completely free workshop that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks on May 26th. And then this is going to build into the release of my first new masterclass in 6 years, which is going to be happening on June 1st, the anti-inflammatory masterclass.
Let's go. I think that one is definitely much needed. Now, I'm assuming you're going to be covering a lot more than just microplastics, but nonetheless, I mean, that's a big part of our conversation today. So what else are you going to be diving into?
I mean, 6 weeks of material in microplastics would be one little part of that.
Right.
And every single day has got like 3 or 4 videos plus a workbook, plus recipes, plus conversation, plus Q&As with me.
Yeah.
So there's going to be so much more to it. And what I'm going to be teaching during the workshop is the first taste of what's in there, because this is going to be stuff that people have never heard from me before.
Cool.
So there's a lot there. And I think, like, again, when it comes to microplastics, above all else, let's try to avoid allowing them into our body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But number 2, let's have anti-inflammatory strategies, because that's what builds our resilience. So even though there's going to be, no matter what you do, I have definite microplastics in my body, even though I do my best. And if you follow all my rules, you will still be exposed to microplastics because they're just too pervasive.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. Do the best you can, but then have these anti-inflammatory mitigation strategies, which is what my entire platform is about.
All right. And as we close out here today, what is the one big takeaway you hope that people have for this episode?
I think we come back to this basic rule: try to avoid heat and acid when it comes to plastic. I just don't want any plastic to come into contact with heat or acid and then go into my body.
All right, let's officially close with the same 5 questions that I posed to you at the beginning of the show. Rapid fire. Microplastics in your blood right now, yes or no?
Definitely in your blood, in your urine, potentially in my testes. So they're there, but again, there's things we can do.
The plastics are beating down the swimmers. Number 2, are they hurting you?
The case is building. I think that there's sufficient evidence. Look, there's no way that they're actually beneficial to your health. And I think that the case that's building is really raising concerns.
Bottled water, worse than tap water, yes or no?
Bottled water is worse than tap water. The absolute ideal is reverse osmosis water. That's where you want your money at.
And can you actually clean these microplastics out of your system, Dr. B?
Clean them out, and supplements that claim to remove microplastics from your body save your money. But when you eat a predominantly plant-based diet, you are inherently avoiding the sources of microplastics, and simultaneously you are addressing inflammation. So that's why you want to focus on that.
And so the single biggest lever that anybody can pull in this case is?
Well, we learned this from the Perth, Australia study that basically, above all else, we want to try to minimize plastic exposure in our food supply. So by making the right choices, by making smart choices, you can actually fulfill that.
Yeah. All right, man. Give us your final thought here. What's your takeaways? We've talked about them, but I love the fact that there's so much, still the fact that this was kind of a doom and gloom conversation, that there's still so much that we can do by limiting our exposure. And then in just a short amount of time, we can see big gains.
That's the point. I mean, the entire point is take these simple suggestions that we have put out there, and basically just don't try to be perfect about it, but make some tweaks, right? Like some of my tweaks are that I try to prioritize reverse osmosis water, that when I go to a coffee shop, I get it in a mug instead, that I won't microwave things inside plastic, that I prefer to not get soup in a plastic container as takeout, right? Those are basic choices.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do those things, the evidence indicates that in just 7 days, you can drop the levels in your body substantially.
All right, my gut insider friend. So now my question to you, the audience, is this. What is the one thing that you're going to get rid of in your kitchen? What are the changes you're going to make to help reduce your exposure to microplastics? Go ahead and drop us a comment below. Let's get a think tank going. Throw around some other ideas that we may not have gotten to here on the show today. So help us raise our microplastic IQ, so to speak. Drop us a comment and let us know what it is that you are going to do to reduce your exposure. And be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, of course. And maybe you got a question for Dr. B that he didn't answer. You can put that in the comments down below as well. But Dr. B, I do believe that is our show for today, my friend.
That's our show. I want to say thanks everyone for being here.
All right. And we will see you next week, my friends. Thanks for checking out the Gut Insiders.